Welcome to Rumings. Every week, we take mini dives into topics and explore it on what it is, what it can be, and what it should be. We are a coach, a psychologist, and an expressive arts practitioner, and we just want to be a part of the conversation. Join us every Sunday if you'd like to ruminate or muse with us. Join us on Rumings.
Welcome back to Rumings. This week, we continue our conversation with Sasha about inner child healing, diving a little deeper into more personal sharings about our own journeys and experiences. I wanted to ask you, Sasha, you mentioned that all adults have wounded children, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how that presents itself? Like what do these wounds look like in adults?
One example is that as a child, if you didn't get enough attention, either from your parents who were working really hard or in any way, right? And you did things like throw tantrums, okay? Or imagine a child that throws tantrums. It's because they just want their presence to be validated or seen, right? If a parent, for instance, doesn't acknowledge that a child, the reason behind why the child is throwing a tantrum, the child could easily carry that pattern of asking for attention through tantrums into their adulthood. And so you see people who sometimes will throw a tantrum when they don't get what they want, if it's in a line or in a queue, at the train station. They'll throw a tantrum, and that's just their pattern which has evolved from their childhood and they have carried it into their adulthood. So, similarly, if you think back, not just this child who throws tantrums, but all of us have patterns that we developed as coping mechanisms in our childhood. And those patterns are not always healthy. So we could easily carry those forward into our adult lives, even today. Even all of us sitting here, I'm sure we can think of one pattern that we've held on to so strongly from our childhood, whatever it is. We do develop them as a child and we do carry them forward for the rest of our lives.
I just wanted to ask you what does your inner child healing look like and how does it show itself? Like we spoke about how the symptoms look like when we are hurt or wounded and disconnected, but how does the work show itself? The healing part. If you can shed some light on that.
Wow, very good question. So, like I said, for each person, this process is different. So, for some people, it may not be as evident the healing as it is for other people. And for some people, it's extremely evident. But what it looks like is increased compassion for yourself because you see where your wounds have begun and you see them as an adult. So, you see that little child within you or that aspect within you that has been wounded. And so you stand up to take care of that inner child or that aspect of yourself. And what happens is you self soothe, you learn to nurture yourself, and your self love increases drastically, which means you stand up for yourself, you don't allow others to take advantage of you, you value yourself in general. So self worth increases, self love increases. But of course, the inner work continues because there are layers. So things will keep coming up, but that initial connect is made, and you can always work on building that relationship throughout your life, right? And you can work on having more and more love for yourself and building your self esteem and your self worth. So that's what the healing looks like. Another thing is joy. For some people, they feel a lot of joy and spontaneously return into their lives, and that itself is wonderful. They just look lighter, they feel lighter, they've released a lot of burden, they've processed a lot of emotions which have been within them for many, many, many years, and they didn't even have any idea that they were there. So lightness for sure, self-compassion, self-love for sure.
We've experienced this part, all three of us, and I just asked this question for our listeners. It's to know if we are still doing the right thing because you don't know, the progress is so different. You can't exactly map it so linearly. But where does forgiveness come in this? That's a needle that almost always gets stuck. We always think forgiveness is so black and white, but it isn't. So, could you talk to us more about those grays?
Yeah, so when we look back at our lives and we view it as an observer, and we become the observer of ourselves and our journeys from the time we were little children till the time we turn into adults and who we are right now. We are able to step back, first of all, and we're able to look at things from a different perspective. So, this does two things. One is we realize that we always acted from a space of wisdom and knowledge that we had at that time. And that is why we did the things that we did. We dealt with the situation the way we thought was right at that time, given the knowledge and wisdom we had then. For most people, they do experience this shift that when I observe myself, when I observe my past, I see that I acted from that space of knowledge that I had then. This kind of brings in that level of awareness and helps a person be a little bit more compassionate towards themselves. And when they are more compassionate towards themselves, then forgiveness is the next step. For a lot more people, it takes more time because there is a lot more guilt involved, or there are other people involved. As you said, they are probably family members that hurt us or hurt them, and in those cases, yes, it takes longer. So I will not deny that for some people it does take years to let go of that attachment to that pain that they hold within them. And that itself is a process that they have to consistently work towards. When it comes to ultimately reaching that point of being able to forgive either themselves or others in their lives, I can only say that this process of connecting with your inner child brings about more awareness. And when we have awareness as to where we are holding on and to what we are holding on to, even if it is something like pain or trauma, then once we've identified that is when we can work towards undoing it, or work towards healing it, or restoring it, or work towards forgiveness. So it all begins with awareness, and that's where this journey begins. So there's no blanket rule, it's very different for everybody. Yes, it's all part of that process.
Yeah, that was beautiful, Sasha. You put that really, really well. One question that I have to ask you is that since you are an expressive arts therapist and Abha is an expressive arts practitioner, how does expressive arts and inner child work together? Because I know that you do use expressive arts in your inner child sessions. How do you think it works hand in hand? I mean, does one facilitate the other?
I think art is an extremely beautiful tool and highly underrated when it comes to mental health and, helping a person just feel joy for that matter. With regards to joy, the minute you start creating or you use any art form, whether it is dance or visual art or whatever it is, even working with clay, you are kind of activating this part of you that is the creative, expressive part of you. As children, we were all creative beings. We would just play with the plastic bags and boxes, cardboard boxes. We were so creative as children, right? And slowly people started telling us that that's not good, and we are not so good at drawing the perfect house, or we are not a cloud should not be pink and things like that, right? So we've all experienced this. We've all had that one art teacher that told us that, oh, you're terrible at this. You don't know how to cut in a straight line. And that's when we began to shut down our innate creativity. And this is where spontaneous art or art therapy is linked so closely in with the inner child. It is regaining that aspect of ourselves, or tapping back into that spontaneous child that loved colors or loved to dance like nobody is watching. And we closed down, right? We just shut that wall, we shut that door and threw away the keys. So unfortunately, we've all gone through that kind of trauma, especially our generation. And I think now parents are much more conscious about this. And I'm grateful for that. But yes, we have to acknowledge that something within us was turned off and shut down. And we need to find that key again and open that door again and access that inner child and tell her that it's okay, or tell him that it's okay to create. And perfection is not the answer, and that process is important. Everybody can relate to this. I can see you all like nodding your heads, but it is very, very true. And I'm sure listeners can also think back of the times when they were shamed for being not the best dancer, not the best singer, but they were just joyful when they did those things. So, yes, joy. It's all about joy and the inner child, and allowing that aspect to come out every once in a while.
That is so true, Sasha, because I think all of us, yes, were nodding because we could relate so much to what you were saying. We've all had these experiences as children, sadly, where we've been told that, our cloud was too purple and it should be blue, or our tree doesn't look like a tree. And sadly, we give up a lot of what gives us joy until we come across people like you and we do these sessions and we realize that no, it doesn't have to be blue, it can also be purple, and that's also beautiful. Ava, what about you? I also wanted to ask you, do you feel like inner child work comes a lot into expressive arts?
Oh, yeah. And in this case, I can speak as someone who's facilitated and as someone who's gone through this work, through this process. And one of my experiences has been that it's beyond words, it's beyond any kind of reasoning, rationality, the logic that we are so bombarded with. It really, this process takes you away, and it's like a literally a bridge, and you're transported in a state of carefree art making, carefree expression, and which ultimately leads you to joy that Sasha was speaking about, which is the heart of, or is what the inner child is essentially about. Yes, it takes time. On the way, what comes up is all those blocks and barricades and obstacles that we have created. And the art somewhere provides you a mirror to show you what is actually happening and how are these blocks and barricades coming up without being harsh, without being judgmental, because you are the person who's creating both the art and the obstacle through art. You know it's coming from you, and that itself changes something so significantly. I've seen my process, I've seen you girls as well. It's remarkable.
Yeah, so beautifully put, Abha, and also the part about being non-verbal. I love that because as children, we expressed ourselves not using language, right? And emotion sometimes can be very non-verbal. You can't really put a finger as to what you're feeling, whether you're feeling confused, angry, and upset, or whether you're just angry and confused. Like, you can't really, as adults, we try to conceptualize and make sense of it using our mind, but as children, who's just processing that emotion, we don't use words. And that's beautiful about art, is that it allows you to process emotions without using words, and just through colors and strokes, and just to tearing up paper if you need to, or squeezing clay. And that's the beauty of it. And like I said, it's highly rated. So I hope that we do more of this and we talk more about this, because everybody should open up to this idea of working with art.
So, since today's topic and conversation is about inner child, we have shared that all three of us also have had our own sessions with Sasha, and all three of us have had very different but all beautiful experiences where we have felt and thought about so many different memories and emotions, which a lot of the times we didn't even know existed, or even if we did know that they existed, we didn't know the intensity with which they existed in. Let me speak about my experience a little bit before I ask Abha and the others. Firstly, with Sasha, it was such a beautiful experience because I have done this session twice with Sasha, and both times such different things came up. And I remember asking Sasha that, do I require another session because I've already done one with you? And she said yes, because each time you do this, your inner child needs something else. And that was so beautiful because I hadn't thought of that, right? Like, my inner child just doesn't need one thing, or isn't just wounded for one reason. There are so many wounds and there are so many things happening. And I remember how both my sessions were so beautifully different, where I remember Sasha also telling me that there are certain things that you've mentioned this time that you didn't even mention in your first session. And both sessions have helped me kind of understand that inner child that I kind of let go of a long time ago. It made me understand all the wounds that were still there and are still there, but I'm still working on. It also, I think, made me conscious about when that little child is troubled or anxious or worried or scared. Although, as Sasha rightly said, it's not easy. It's not that once you do the session, you're healed and you're completely fine. It definitely still is an ongoing struggle and challenge sometimes. But that awareness that it brings to you when you understand it and when you know where it's coming from and why it's hurting so much and what you can do in that moment to kind of allow it or comfort it a little bit, I think has made a huge difference to me. So thank you so much, Sasha, for being that patient, kind, gentle angel in my life.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Simon. So beautiful the way you brought up some very important points that, you can do the session twice at different stages in your life and they can look very different. It's amazing that you were open to that. You went back to the process, even though at a later stage in your life when you felt the need for it again. You felt the need of rekindling that connection. Like we are so complex, right? We can't process our entire lives in a day or in one session, right? It doesn't work like that. There's so many facets, there's so many layers, there's so many memories embedded so deep within the subconscious, and these can come out much later in your lives, and we have to be okay with that. We have to be compassionate to that inner child, or compassionate to ourselves that is constantly accumulating, constantly absorbing from the environment around, constantly feeling and constantly being wounded even after healing. We have to realize that life is going to be like that. It's going to be up and down, and you went back to yourself. And that's amazing. And I'm so grateful that you did that. So thank you for sharing that wonderful experience.
Abba, would you like to share your experience?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You can throw your tantrums in red for all you want. Being with Sasha here, it feels like it happened yesterday. Yes, it was on a Zoom call, but what happened for me was all the chaos, the emotion, the right of emotions, everything got validated. That yes, everything is okay in that moment, and that shifted things so drastically. The battle was half won right there. I was heard, I was received, and the rest was all about processing those things. In the months that followed, once that chaos started settling, sometimes it does blow up in a storm even now, but I know the path, if not the exact steps to go back. And there's another beautiful thing that has happened is it's just not the wounding or the hurt that the inner child is screaming out to you. There's so much more that inner child has to tell you about your own self, and that's been an amazing journey because you slowly learn to listen to your own self, which takes a long time. Yes, you have to create that environment, you have to create a certain silence. Yes, it's your responsibility as well. But it's not just about the wounding. Um, so, this process led me to see beyond fixing or taking care of or putting the balm on the wound, but okay, what's more? A discovery, and like you, there is an adventure within you that's left to be explored, which will keep growing and evolving because you are not the same person. You will change, and that's what also this inner child connection is also about, is what I am discovering now. And that's been a very beautiful knowing, which I want to hold on to very preciously. My inner child wants to, let's face it.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Oh, so beautiful how two people and such different experiences, right? I mean, it's incredible. This is why I love what I do, because I learn so much from people like you, and it really helps. It helps others as well to see that aspect of. I love that aspect that you mentioned of the excitement, not only healing the wounds but tuning into the excitement of what's more, like what are the possibilities, what am I capable of, and you tap into that infinite potential that exists within you, right? And if someone accesses that, then I feel so grateful and so much joy for them, because I know that if you're listening to yourself, if you're tuning into what that inner child is sharing, then you are tapping into your infinite wisdom. Thanks for sharing that. Beautiful.
For me, it was also a bit of a strange eye opener because I really like the way Abha put it, exploring the silences. I didn't, with my session with Sasha, I mean, she's brilliant at what she does because she didn't have to say it or show it, but she gave me the space to actually rediscover memories, revisit them and see them from a very different light now. That brought up a lot of things that I thought I had sorted, and I had dusted it under the carpet, out of my house, doesn't matter to me anymore. And which is why I think it was so interesting because what inner child does for you, when you do it now, is you see everything in such a beautiful perspective, right? You see the edges. It's not all blurred with nostalgia because that's what memory does, right? It tells you, oh, I had a great childhood, or, I'm not saying that childhood is bad, but everything can scar you when you don't know how, and you don't know the power of that scar and when it becomes a wound, right? But at the same time, I learned a little bit more about my silences. So now when I have an outburst or when I'm actually in a fix, it takes me just a little bit longer. Maybe at the end of the day, I do ask myself, how much was it the child in me who was screaming for attention, or how much was the adult in me not listening to the child, right? So it opens an awareness which is impossible to ignore. We've been speaking about it all throughout, the grays, the forgiveness, the shadow, the light, and of course color, right? Because I think that is one of the most underrated things about an inner child. A child revels in color, right? And somehow as an adults we just forgot about it, forgot about feeling color. So that was all thanks to Sasha and partly even Abha's sessions, where it helps you analyze the present situation better, and forgiveness comes easier. Letting go comes easier now if you understand where and what affects your inner child. Yeah.
From your amazing share, which had like so many aspects to it, the one that I'd like to just point out is the awareness. It all starts with awareness, and yes, we all have a lot of work to do, and we are going to keep having a lot of work to do because that's the nature of the world that we live in. You've taken that step, you have started on the process, and you're bringing that awareness into your life every day, and you're acknowledging and honoring your inner child, and that itself is amazing. And I hope it takes you further and into your potential, your highest potential.
I think all three of us have had such different, unique, but I think beautiful understandings of our own selves. We have come to know parts of ourselves which probably we wouldn't have if we hadn't done this session, and that goes for all three of us. So, thank you so much, Sasha, on behalf of all three of us. For our listeners, we just want to leave our listeners today with what they can do to connect with and honor themselves.
It's important to make all that we are speaking about practical and available to all our listeners. So, what can you do to honor and connect with your inner child? Okay, so really simply, you can go out in nature, walk around, and connect with the tree, or tune into the colors, tune into the sensations, say of the wind on your face, or look at the shapes of the leaves, and things that you would as a little child observe in nature. You can try that. Okay, so as a little child you'd be like fascinated by the shape of a leaf or the color of the soil. So tune into that, go with that intention that today on my walk I'm going to look through the eyes of a child, and see how that works for you. So you can try to make contact and connect with your inner child in that way. Some other things you can do is definitely get some crayons or get some paints, and a blank sheet of paper, and just let it flow. Just let loose, and you can make a mess if you like. Just enjoy that process, and you can express to your inner child. Another way in which you can honor your inner child is, so we all get angry, we all feel sad, we all feel upset, and as adults we tend to beat ourselves up for what we are feeling. Oh, I shouldn't cry, I must be strong. So we all have these narratives of how we should feel. I would say to honor your inner child, remember or remind yourself that it's okay to feel a whole bunch of emotions from day to day, because you are dealing with a lot and you are processing a lot, and you do have that inner child within you who feels things at varying intensities. So it's okay to feel anger and some of those, very dense negative emotions. It's okay to feel them, as long as you are not reacting in a disruptive manner and saying, "This is my inner child that's beating you up." As long as you're just acknowledging that, okay, I'm very angry right now. Okay, I'm feeling incredibly sad. I just want to go to bed and watch a movie or read a book. You know, just addressing and honoring all your emotions, whether they're positive, whether they're negative, is a way in which you can honor the child within. So, those are a few things to try. I hope they are helpful. And if you have any experience with them, then do leave comments at the Rumings page for us to know about them.
This has been such a beautiful journey, understanding forgiveness, looking at what healing looks like. And also, we spoke about knowing each other's inner child experiences. And I think this is one of the first times that we've actually spoken so much about each of our experiences. So, really, really a beautiful journey. All three of us, Sasha, and all our inner children, would like to thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for being so patient and for answering all our questions about the inner child healing process. We'd also like to leave our listeners with a question at the end, as we always do. We'd like to ask you about your inner child. Have you met him or her as yet? And if you have, how do you connect with that part of you? Please let us know on our Instagram page, Happy Roomings. We love to hear what you have to say. Thank you for joining in to our part 2 series on inner child healing. We hope that this series leaves you a little more connected to your inner child. See you next Sunday. Happy Roomings.